The powerful National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, says Joe Biden should not only nationalize every public school, but double the amount of tax dollars they receive. Constitution, anybody? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness of back in K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. As you can see, I've got my Freedom Tumbler, and you should too. Just head over to patriotclub.us, that's patriotclub.us, to make a one-time tax-deductible donation, and we'll ship your tumbler. The Pat Riot Club appreciates your support. All right, Katie joins us now with a look at the life support situation of our once healthy republic.
I know. I get it. We all want to leave 2020 so very far behind us that we never even knew it existed, like Joe Biden does after most of the comments he makes. But we must award the worst of the worst for the worst year of this century. Just one more time. Let me explain. Good day and welcome to the 2020 Worst of the Worst So Very Bad Awards. We know 2020 was almost completely awful, but in the spirit of healing, please let me know in the comments something positive, not COVID positive, that happened in 2020. Now let's get to it and kick off 2021 with a smidge of positive momentum by taking out the trash of the 2020 Worst of the Worst So Very Bad Awards.
Living for today. Yeah.
We begin with our first award, the Hippo, or Hypocrite, for those of you who want to use full words. This award goes to the person who said, all for thee, but none for me. Unless we're talking about doing whatever the H-E double hockey sticks I want to do, then it's all for me and none for thee. I'm better than you in every way, and my millions of dollars in the bank prove that. Let me just say, Satan has been a great tipper. Anyway, and the nominees are... Bold-faced lie, brown chestnut, and extra mousy moose, Nancy Pelosi.
Because what we have to do is shelter in place. That is really the answer. Testing, tracing, treatment, shelter in place.
Well, I don't. I think that that Bishop Solon owes me an apology for setting up.
Sassy McSass, mayor of murderous Chicago, Lori Lightfoot.
We are sending inspectors out. We will demand that you do this, and if you do not, we will shut you down. I'm out in the public eye, and you know, I'm a person who I take my personal hygiene very seriously. As I said, I felt like I needed to have a haircut. I'm not able to do that myself, and so I got a haircut.
And the final nominee, Kamalama Ding Dong, Kamala Harris.
It was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
And Joe is a healer, a uniter, a tested and steady hand.
I said a flip, flop, a flip it. The Hippo goes to Kamalama Ding Dong, just so I can remind you that 2021 will unfortunately see a lot of her, but hopefully not like Willie Brown saw her.
No.
For being a fracking flip-flopper like no other. From her position on prostitution, but not her own with Willie Brown, to her positions on what happens behind bars, the prison variety, not what she does in those other bars, again, not Willie Brown, Kamalama Ding Dong flipped and then flopped like she did with Willie Brown. Now, some of the hippos did provide weak AF groveling, but unfortunately they didn't make the nominee list for the next award, the Woke Apology Award. And the nominees are Surfer Soy Boy, Gavin Newsom.
The spirit of what I'm preaching all the time was contradicted, and I got to own that. And so I want to apologize to you. Because I need to preach and practice, not just preach and not practice. And I've done my best to do that.
Broken-ribbed and emasculated Drew Brees.
The years and years of social injustice, police brutality, and the need for so much reform and change in regards to legislation and so many other things to bring equality to our black communities. I am sorry, and I will do better, and I will be part of the solution.
Toxic environment caused by environmentally conscious Ellen DeGeneres.
I have a platform and I have a voice, and I have always stood for equality. I have always wanted to be the voice for people who felt like they didn't have a voice, because I know what that feels like.
And the woke apology goes to Drew Brees. I apologize for having to choose any one of them. I know not what I do. My white privilege, racism and sexism, orange man bad, equity, amen, and a woman. Bruce accepts the woke apology award on behalf of all those who are made to care and believe that all police are bad and all black people are saints. Pun intended. And as a PSA, you can't just treat people as individuals, and you can't just play football, for the mob says you must judge every component of your life based on race. And if that race is white, you are guilty. On to the next award, the Master Debater. And the nominees are... When I think about Zoom meetings, I touch myself, Jeffrey Toobin.
This misconduct is so much at the heart of what the framers meant by high crimes and misdemeanors.
Spirit of the Democratic Age, Marianne Williamson.
I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
I'm a bug-eyed vegan potato, Cory Booker.
And I feel qualified to say this as the vegan on the stage. Going back to the fact that it's rich to me that we asked 3 people about their health. When looking at this stage, we know that the most unhealthy person running for the presidency in 2020 is Donald Trump.
Caveat. Yes, the debate comments were actually made in 2019, but please don't beat on that point too much. Which brings us to answer the question. Who is the master debater? And the master debater goes to Jeffrey Toobin, who tapped into his potential over Spirit Wonder and Spartacus. The once presidential candidates brought a lot of love to their master debating, but Jeffrey Toobin handed out the most. Toobin could not be reached for an acceptance speech. His hands are occupied as he is currently traveling in the nether regions or the Netherlands, but more likely nether regions. While Toobin can travel, no one else is allowed, as the next nominees tell us. The next award is for the Government Overlord of the Year. And the nominees are... Groundhog murderer and COVID convict commie, Bill de Blasio.
It's not business as usual. I hate to say it, but I have to urge all New Yorkers, do not travel out of state for the holidays. Do not travel to a state with a high infection rate. Do not travel to a country with a high infection rate.
Older Fredo grandma killer and Pacino wannabe, Andrew Cuomo.
What are you talking about? You're now going to override. We did it already. That's the law. An orange zone and a red zone. Follow the facts.
I'm still confused.
Well, then you're confused.
Wormwood and De Niro wannabe, Anthony Fauci.
To be consistent and listen to what health officials, like myself, if I may, are saying. Put everything else aside and uniformly do the right thing.
And the government overlord goes to Bill de Blasio. It was a tight race with many nominees, as the road to hell is wide and nicely paved. But de Blasio sealed his disgrace with the New Year's Eve last-ditch effort for the win. In 2020, de Blasio demonstrated that he does not care for humans at all. His state-level counterpart killed Grandma, and de Blasio just went along with it. But he did shove Grandma off to the side by prioritizing the COVID vaccine for drug addicts over Grandma. And then he danced on her impending grave on New Year's Eve with his wife in Times Square, even though no one was allowed in Times Square. He can dance if he wants to. He has no friends to leave behind anyway. Seriously, who needs Dick Clark when you have Dick de Blasio? Just like Hollyweird award shows, there were smaller, less important awards handed out that no one ever heard of, but everyone gets a prize in today's times, and we should announce those before we get to the big kahuna of the Overall Dumpster Fire Award. So very quickly, the Senility Award. The nominees I already forgot, so just give it to Joe Biden, which is basically how the 2020 election went anyway.
All men and women created by you know the thing.
The Tear of the Year award went to Don Sourpuss Lemon after fellow CNN talking head Chris Cuomo was diagnosed with COVID-19.
Sorry, I said I wasn't going to do this. Jesus. He's probably sitting at home laughing at me.
Everyone is laughing. And they are chanting in the streets in one-syllable increments because that's all they know, be it in Chaz Chop, all over California, or in the streets by the Capitol. So then the protest chant of the year is the hey, hey, ho, ho, blankety blank has got to go. So empowering. I almost couldn't contain myself right there. Now, a little explanation on the next award, the Monolith Award. There were but 2 nominees, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and an actual monolith. These inanimate objects are the nominees because no one knows why they are there, just taking up space, and hopefully they just disappear one day, never to be seen again. It was a tight race for this one, but the monolith edged out AOC, as it was found to have more insight and intrigue. Now on to our Person of the Year, who really embraces being a real summary of 2020. Carol Baskin. She was everything right and wrong with 2020. Just sum up 2020 as being like that bitch, Carol Baskin. Now, without further ado, the lowest of the low, the worst of the 2020, worst of the worst, so very bad awards. The Dumpster Fire Award. The nominees are those 535 mostly hollow souls who decide when to work and how much money you owe. Congress. The elites in their high towers pontificating on how stupid you must be. Mainstream news media. The other elites who don't want you to do that thing called living. Mayors and governors of the West Coast and New York. As you can see, at this point, I just want to get these awards over with. In the name of equity, they can all share the dang award. You tell me in the comments what you think about the Dumpster Fire Award and who or what should get it. And of course, share the video if you'd be so kind. Now, just like Holly weird award shows, this one feels like it sucked all the hope and joy of life out of me. But it's 2021, everyone, so let's see what this year brings. Can it really be any worse than 2020? Why, yes. Yes, it can. Until next time, stay healthy, America.
Joined now by our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me, Duke. Great to be with you.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And you got a great story for us here. It's to the surprise of really nobody. Now that Biden seems poised to assume the presidency, the NEA and other teachers' unions are already pushing as hard as they can unconstitutional issues. They want the President of the United States to use his power unconstitutionally to transform American public schools into something very ominous. Talk about the story, Alex.
Yeah, it really reads like a wish list developed by, far left kooks. That's because it's what it is. But I mean, they talk about mandatory kindergarten for every child starting at age 5. The government needs to run, pre-kindergarten, universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. They want government daycare for children younger than that. I mean, it is a Marxist utopian vision. And really, it would formalize what's been going on, what you and I have been documenting for the last decade, Duke, and that is the nationalization of our schools. They would double federal funding for the indoctrination camps. They would put all these new mandates. Basically, local school boards would become, more so than they already are, just kind of administrative units of a centralized bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. They promise much more LGBT indoctrination, much more hyper-racialism. All the children need to know that they can choose any gender they want and, take their puberty blockers. It's crazy town, and it's what they're asking Biden, Harris, and national leaders to implement come January 21st.
Well, we've talked about this a lot over the years, and your article sort of foregrounds this, that this is a call for Joe Biden to nationalize the schools. You just gave a couple of examples, but be a little bit more specific about what do you mean when you say they want the NEA, the largest teachers union in the country, about 3 million members, they want the public school system to be nationalized. What does that mean?
Yeah, they basically want every public school in America, including every charter school, by the way, and they say this specifically, every charter school in America must obey, they say, all laws and regulations that apply to traditional public schools, which would, of course, make the charter schools simply, slightly different versions of public schools, but they say they want all of them to basically be taking their instructions from Washington, D.C. in terms of what they teach, how they're structured. They want to turn every school, they say, into a full-service community center. And so even the last little vestiges of power that still remain with local school boards and state departments of education, not that they ever use these powers to defy the recommendations and suggestions from D.C., would be eliminated. And your local public school would basically become an appendage of the bureaucracy out of Washington, D.C. And to accomplish that, they talk about doubling the funding. They talk about imposing mandates. I mean, they really talk as if there were no Constitution at all. In their defense, probably many of them were miseducated at a government school. They don't know what the Constitution says. They don't know why it's valuable. They don't know how it limits federal power. So they're not even thinking like, hey, the Constitution doesn't allow this. They're just thinking, hey, this is a great chance to impose our wacky ideas even on those silly conservatives in conservative states that don't agree with us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read through the document. Did you see anywhere in the document where they're talking about how they're going to make our kids literate, how they're going to give our kids college-ready instruction, how they're going to teach minority kids how to read? Any idea about that in the document? They call it a manifesto. In the manifesto, is there any sense where they're going to care about that kind of stuff?
Nothing. It really is disgraceful. They have countless more words on all sorts of political issues that don't even remotely intersect with education, but nothing, you're right, about how we're going to turn American children into literate human beings, critical thinkers, engineers, doctors. It really is quite disgraceful, but there's endless amounts of regurgitation of we need this federal law, we need amnesty for illegal immigrants, we need to renew the Violence Against Women Act, we need a constitutional amendment to enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment that already went down in flames decades ago because it was ridiculous. So a lot of political garbage, very little in terms of how we're actually going to educate children and turn them into productive, decent human beings.
Yeah, it's dangerous for a lot of reasons. One, 10 years ago, you'd have seen a manifesto like this, and you would have rolled your eyes and you knew it never had a chance. Now, you can't be so sure. And what they're certainly telling us is this: if not this year, then soon. If we can't, manipulate President Joe Biden into doing these things, well, then we'll wait to see if Kamala Harris becomes president, right? They're going to keep pushing this until they get what they want. After the break here, a hard break, let's come back and talk about some of the extra scholastic stuff, the kind of things that they're demanding as teachers' unions that they think they have the right to demand on behalf of their constituency. Back again with Alex Newman, our international correspondent. So we've been talking about how the NEA, the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, is making outrageous and Orwellian demands from the incoming Biden administration of what they want. We spent the first segment talking a little bit about how uneducational all of this was, how these demands were all political correctness and all sociological initiatives, more race baiting, more gender baiting. But on top of that, they go into great detail what else they want. I don't know, being an educational platform, what makes them think they're entitled to this, but share some of the issues they also want to see happen from a Biden administration that they are demanding take place.
Yeah, thank you, Duke. I'm happy to do that. And I'll start off by pointing out that this is not just a group of fringe kooks. I mean, they are fringe kooks as far as the American people would be concerned, but they purport to represent over 3 million people. This is the largest labor union in America. They spend millions of dollars on political races, targeting their enemies and getting their allies elected. And so especially among Democrats, when the NEA speaks out, the NEA typically gets what it wants if Democrats are in power. It's a very, very powerful organization. It's an extremely corrupt organization. Much more will be coming out about that very soon. And I'm just thrilled that some of this corruption is going to be exposed. But with that said, some of the things they're asking for, they demand amnesty for all illegal immigrants. They want them put on a pathway to citizenship, which means they'll eventually be voters. And they know from the polling data, 80-90% of them will be voting for Democrats. They think, hey, we'll have a permanent one-party state that we control. They want the Violence Against Women Act, which many wonderful women, including Phyllis Schlafly, have said is an absolute abomination. It's almost designed to tear families apart. It's unconstitutional. It comes down from the federal level and forces states to do certain things. They ask for government-controlled health care. They actually ask that the federal government declare health care to be a right. Okay, now this illustrates a profound misunderstanding of what a right actually is. And it's much more dangerous than just having the government take over healthcare, which in itself is incredibly dangerous. It also redefines the concept of rights in America. In America, our rights come from God. These are negative rights, right? You have the right to speak freely. You have the right to your life, right? Nobody can kill you. The government's not allowed to steal your property. If this NEA vision of what rights should be is adopted, rights will then become things that the government must give you, things that the government must take from others and give to you. And, of course, there's the fact that you would lose your healthcare freedom. If the government is the sole provider of healthcare and it's your right to get healthcare, you'd get the same thing as you get in Cuba or in Venezuela or in a lot of the European countries where government runs healthcare. And this is just scratching the surface, Duke. I encourage people to go read the article. We have a link directly to the manifesto. It is packed full of unconstitutional, big government, Orwellian, and totalitarian policies that, to quote Barack Hussein Obama, would fundamentally transform the United States of America.
Yeah, and if you don't need to go to Cuba to figure out what socialized medicine would do to this country, take a look about how your political betters are handling COVID-19, telling you to lock down, canceling your Christmas, not allowing you to attend church, while they're maskless dancing in Times Square, when they're flying overseas to the Caribbean to enjoy the holiday while you're locked down. They make the laws that you follow, and they don't have to. That's how government healthcare works. They have the power to punish people they don't like organized religion, to reward people they do like, Black Lives Matter, no consequence for them out in the streets. You want to see what national healthcare looks like? Look no farther than COVID.
That's right. And you know what's interesting too, Duke, is a lot of these idiotic policies have already been tried, not just in Cuba, not just in North Korea, not just in Venezuela, but even in some American states. You've got California, Illinois, and New York that are on the forefront of this idiocy. And you would expect, if these ideas were great, that you would have people flocking from other parts of the country. Please let me into California. Please let me into Illinois. Instead, what you have is a massive exodus. These states are bankrupt. They're falling apart. People are fleeing to freer states like Florida and Texas. So now they say, hey, let's do it nationally, so you have nowhere to run. This is craziness. These people must be restrained. I think their objective is to destroy our country, Duke.
You know, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I mean, a lot of conservative voices, including ours, said that should Joe Biden become the next president, it was going to be almost incredibly difficult to imagine a situation down the road where you had any Republicans controlling government again. And if you look at what the NEA is trying to do, it's a pretty good step, right? To one party rule, one state rule, one state. You're moving inexorably and very quickly now to socialism. Alex, thanks for your time. We appreciate the report.
It's time for some real education. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee was instantly successful and widely read in high schools and middle schools in the United States. Written in 1960, it's become a classic of American literature, having won a Pulitzer Prize.
And as far as this goes, you know, this is the last day of our week-long homage to 3 books that are under the gun. We've talked on Wednesday, the Wednesday show, about how the progressive left is now beginning to come after the classics. Look, if Western culture is racist, we got to stop reading their books. That's how they figure, right? So they're coming after the Odyssey. We did some quotes from the Odyssey for instant classics. They came after the Scarlet Letter, the great book by Nathaniel Hawthorne. We've done some quotes for that. And I want to close by another book that you really wouldn't think would be under the gun. It is To Kill a Mockingbird, a book dedicated to showing the horrors of slavery, the injustice, the illegality, the unfairness of racial discrimination in the South during the 1930s. But nevertheless, the book has a white hero, according to the left. Atticus Finch is white, and therefore the book has to be pulled off the shelves because it also uses the N-word and it has a white hero, not a black hero. So I want to share with the readers in Instant Classics another quote from the book. And remember, this is the kind of stuff that white liberal public school teachers don't think should be exposed to your kids. This kind of writing, this kind of thinking. This particular quote comes from Mayelle Ewell. She is the white woman who has a consensual sexual encounter with Tom Robinson and then freaks out because of what people may think of her, and she turns that consensual encounter into rape. Really betrays Tom, even though she was the one who led Tom on. She was the one who basically seduced Tom. When I say consensual, it didn't have to be anything more than a kiss. And the bottom line is she turned it into a rape. And so listen to this quote about Atticus explaining her. She has committed no crime, technically. She has merely broken a rigid and time-honored code of our society, a code so severe that whoever breaks it is hounded from our midst as unfit to live with, talking, of course, about miscegenation, marrying against the race. She is the victim of cruel poverty and ignorance, but I cannot pity her. She is white. She knew full well the enormity of her offense, but because her desires were stronger than the code she was breaking, she persisted in breaking it. She persisted, and her subsequent reaction is something that all of us have known at one time or another. She did something every child has done. She tried to put the evidence of her offense away from her. But in this case, she was no child hiding stolen contraband. She struck out at her victim of necessity. She must put him away from her. He must be removed from her presence, from this world. She must destroy the evidence of her offense. She's poor. She's uneducated. She's only living by a Southern code that prohibited whites and blacks to interact physically. That wasn't necessarily her fault, but when push came to shove, the code was bigger than her bravery. I have no sympathy for her, this white woman, Atticus says, nor should he, and nor should you. This kind of correct and adult thinking is now banned because of the race of the hero of the book and the fact that the N-word occurs. Way to go, public schools.
All right, before we go, just a reminder, the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So take just a hot 10 seconds today and follow at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. Now, we want to take a moment to show some love, as we do, for our Patriot Club members. And today, we're going to give a shout out to Cynthia from Hart, Michigan. Now, it's not H-E-A-R-T, it's H-A-R-T, but you know what? I'm putting a little E in there. Thank you, Cynthia, for supporting us here at Freedom Project. And if you're a fan of this show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club, and we're going to send you our signature tumbler. Visit patriotclub.us to get started. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. For awards shows, the Golden Globe statue actually weighs the lightest at just 5.5 pounds, while the SAG Award is about 12 pounds. Those skinny little celebrities have to hold up.
No wonder the SAG Award sags under all that weight. And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends. And that means don't ban books.